is Soumya. I've been creating this GCP Associate Cloud Engineer practice test and I've already posted 3 modules. So this is a module 4. This module contains set of 20 questions. These are set of practice questions which you can go through. So this will help you in taking up your exam. I hope this video will be helpful to you. This is a continuation of previous module. In previous module, I have posted questions until 60. So today let's get started with question 61. You're working as an intern at a tech company. Your manager has assigned you a task to Dockerize their application and later deploy it on the Kubernetes engine. What approach should you take? So these are the options available. Now let's take a look at each of these options. Option A, use kubectl app deploy Docker file name in your CLI. This option is not correct because before executing this kubectl command to deploy on JKE, first we need to push the image to the container registry. So this option is not correct. Option B, use gcloud app deploy followed by the Docker file name in your CLI. This command itself is wrong. We cannot use this gcloud command to deploy to GKE. We have to make use of kubectl command. This command itself is not correct. Option C, build a Docker image from the Docker file and upload it to the container registry. Create a deployment YAML file to point to the newly uploaded image. Use the kubectl command line utility to create the deployment with that file. This is the correct option. First, we need to push the Docker image to the Google container registry. Once the Docker image is uploaded to the container registry, next we need to create a deployment YAML file and then use kubectl command line utility to deploy the file. These are the correct steps which needs to be followed to Dockerize the application and deploy to the Kubernetes engine. Option D, build a Docker image from the Docker file and upload it to cloud storage. Create a deployment YAML file to point to the newly uploaded image. Use the kubectl command line utility to create the deployment with that file. In this option, steps 2 and 3 are correct, but step 1, here they are suggesting to upload it to the cloud storage. This is not correct because the kubectl tool cannot use an image directly from the cloud storage. So we have to make use of container registry for dockerizing the application. So option D is not correct. Next question, you are developing a new metaverse application and want to build CI/CD pipelines with Jenkins. You need to deploy the Jenkins server quickly using the fewest steps possible. What should you do? These are the options available. Now let's take a look at each of these options. Option A, download Jenkins Java var, deploy it to App Engine standard. Since Jenkins needs persistent disk storage, it cannot be deployed on App Engine. So option A is not correct. Option B, create a new compute engine instance, install Jenkins through the command line interface. So we can create a compute engine instance and install Jenkins via command line interface, but this process takes a longer time. In the question, they want us to install Jenkins in a fastest way. So we have to do it in a quicker way. Option B takes a lot of time. Now let's take a look at option C. Create a Kubernetes cluster on compute engine. Use the Jenkins Docker image to create a deployment. So this is another method where we can deploy Jenkins, but this method also takes considerable amount of time. So now let's take a look at option D. Launch the Jenkins solution using the GCP Marketplace. So making use of GCP Marketplace, you can install Jenkins in few clicks. So this is the fastest way where you can deploy Jenkins. So for this question, option D is the correct solution. Now let's move ahead with the next question. You are working at a giant e-commerce company. Thousands of users access your website per minute. You have created a deployment using the deployment manager. You have updated the deployment definition file to add a new compute engine instance. You need to update the deployment on GCP, but you cannot afford downtime for any resources. Which command should you use? Now let's take a look at each of these options. Option A, gcloud deployment manager deployments create --config followed by the deployment config path. So these options suggest to create a deployment But in the question, they just want us to update the deployment on GCP. So option A is not correct. Option B, gcloud deployment manager deployments update hyphen hyphen config followed by the deployment config path. Using this command, we can update the existing deployment. So when we execute this command, it will update the existing deployment. This is a correct option for this question. Option C and D are not correct for this question because the command itself is wrong. Here they are executing this gcloud deployment manager followed by resource, but this resources command does not have any subcommand with create and update. So this option C and D are not correct. Option B is the correct solution for this question. Now let's move ahead with next question. You have 1000 GB of user analytics data on BigQuery. You need to run a query on the data set but expect it to return a lot of records. You want to find out the cost of running the query before running it. You are using on-demand pricing. What should you do? These are the options available. Now let's take a look at each of this option. Option A, switch to flat rate pricing for this query, then move back to on demand. This option is not correct because first we need to purchase the dedicated query processing capacity for enabling the flat pricing, and this is not a cost effective option. If we just want to estimate the cost of running a query, this is not the cost effective option. Option B, run a dry run query using the command line to estimate the number of bytes read. Then use a pricing calculator to convert that bytes estimate to dollars. So this is the correct method to follow. BigQuery charges you based on the amount of data processed by your queries, and performing a dry run gives you an estimate of the number of bytes that will be read and processed if you run your query. So this option is correct. Option C, run a dry run query using the command line to estimate the number of bytes written, then use the pricing calculator to convert that bytes estimate to dollars. This option is not correct because the dry run will not return any actual data. It just gives you an estimate of the amount of data that will be processed if a particular query is run. So this option is not correct. Option D, run a select count star query to estimate how many records your query will look through. Then convert the number of rows to dollars using the pricing calculator. Even this option is not correct because BigQuery will charge money for running the actual query. But in the question, we just have to find out the cost of running the query before running it. But all other options suggest to run the query. So this will incur charges. So option B is the correct solution for this question. Now let's move on with the next question. You have developed a note taking application that you want to run on the Google Cloud platform. For that, you are planning to create a single binary of the application and run it on GCP. You want to automatically scale the application efficiently and fast based on CPU usage. Your engineering manager has asked you to use virtual machines directly. What should you do? These are the options available. Now let's take a look at each of this option. Option A, create a Google Kubernetes engine cluster. Deploy the binary as a deployment with horizontal pod auto-scaling to scale the application. This option is not correct because first we need to dockerize the application to run it on Kubernetes cluster, and we cannot run the binary directly. In this option, it suggests to deploy the binary directly to the cluster, but this is not possible. First, we need to dockerize the application, then we need to deploy to the cluster. Option B, create a compute engine instance template. Use the template in the autoscaling managed instance group. Managed instance group will automatically scale the application based on the CPU usage by default. So this option is correct. In the question, they want us to automatically scale the application efficiently and fast based on CPU usage. So by setting up a managed instance group, we can achieve this. So option B is correct. Option C, create a compute engine instance template. Use the template in a managed instance group that scales up and down based on the time of day. So this is a manual process. So here we need to manually scale up and down based on time of the day. So this does not offer the auto scaling functionality. So this option is not correct. Option D, Use of third-party tools to automate scaling of the application up and down based on stack driver CPU usage monitoring. This will be a complex process using the third-party tool to automatically scale the application and also to make use of stack driver. So this makes the entire process complex and it is not efficient. To automatically scale the application, the best option is to use the managed instance group. So for this question, option B is the correct solution. Now let's move ahead with the next question. You need to present the cost and estimated budget analysis to your investors. You are planning to estimate the budget for your cloud cost for the next 6 months. For that, you need to perform an analysis of Google Cloud Platform service cost from multiple separate projects and create a projection estimate of cost by service type, daily, and monthly. Your team is comfortable using standard query syntax. What steps should you take? These are the options available. Option A, export your bill to a cloud storage bucket, import it into Cloud Bigtable for analysis. We will not be able to export the billing information directly to Bigtable, and also we cannot run complex analytics with a Bigtable. So this option is not correct. Option B, export your bill to a cloud storage bucket, import it into Cloud Sheets for analysis. Using Google Sheets, we can perform the basic analysis of billing reports and predict the spending, but it is not the efficient way. So, option B is not correct. Option C, export your transactions to a local file, perform analysis with a desktop tool. Even this is not the efficient way. Option D, export your bill to a BigQuery dataset, write time window based SQL queries for analysis. We can export the billing reports from multiple projects to a single BigQuery dataset and then we can use the SQL to perform the analysis. So this option is correct. Now let's move it with the next question. You are storing CCTV video footage on cloud storage. In order to save cost, you need to move videos stored in a specific cloud storage regional bucket to code line after 90 days and then delete them after 1 year from their creation. How should you set up the policy? These are the options available. Now let's take a look at each of these options. Option A, enable cloud storage object lifecycle management and set age conditions with set storage class and delete actions. Set the storage class action to 90 days and the delete action to 275 days. This option is not correct because in step 2, if we set the delete action to 275 days, then it will delete after 275 days. But in the question, they want us to delete it after 1 year from the creation, which will be 365 days. But in this option, it suggests to set it to 275 days. So this option is not correct. Option B, enable cloud storage object lifecycle management and set age conditions with set storage class and delete actions. Set the storage class action to 90 days and the delete action to 365 days. So here we are setting the lifecycle management to change the storage class. We'll be setting the storage class to cold line and then setting the delete action. After 90 days, these videos will be moved to the cold line and then it will get deleted after 1 year from their creation. So this option is correct. Option C, use JS util rewrite and set the delete action to 275 days. Again here, by setting 275 days, it will delete it after 275 days and also we are not setting the storage class here. So this option is not correct. Option D, use JS util rewrite and set the delete action to 365 days. So we will not be able to use a rewrite command here. We just have to move the data to cold line after 90 days and then delete it after 1 year. To achieve this, we have to follow the steps mentioned in option B. So option B is the correct solution for this question. Let's move ahead with the next question. Your web development company was founded in the early 2000s and is self-hosted. You are migrating your web application from on-prem servers to GCP. Your application uses MySQL as its database. You have identified that you can run your application on a Linux VM and connect to the MySQL instance on Cloud SQL. Your security team has created a service account with the appropriate access rights. You are asked to use that service account to connect to Cloud SQL instead of the default Compute Engine service account. What should you do? These are the options available. Now let's take a look at each of this option. Option A, specify the service account under the Identity and API Access section by creating the VM via the web console. This option is correct because assigning the service account to the VM will automatically allow applications running on it to use the application default credentials without the need for any further configurations. Option B, download a JSON private key for the service account. On the project metadata, add the JSON as the value for the key compute engine service account. This option is not correct because adding the service account JSON key in project metadata will not let the VM access the credentials. Option C, download a JSON private key for the service account. On the custom metadata of the VM, add the JSON as the value for the key compute engine service account. This option is not correct because adding the service account JSON key in instance metadata is not secure and it should be avoided. Option D, download the JSON private key for the service account after creating the VM, SSH into the VM and save the JSON under compute engine service account.json. Again, this is not the secure option because manually saving the JSON key in the VM is not secure and it is also not the efficient way. So for this question, option A is the correct answer. Now let's proceed with the next question. You are head of the backend and database management team in your company. Your DB team does weekly maintenance on your company's customers and operational data. DB team has upgraded one of the SQL servers on a Windows Compute Engine instance to the latest version and asked you to test with the new version so they can roll out the upgrade to all servers. In order to do some debugging, you want to connect to this instance. How can you do it in the fewest number of steps? These are the options available. Now let's take a look at each of this option. Option A, install an RDP client on your desktop, SSH into the VM on port 3389. Just installing an RDP client will not provide access to a Windows server, so this option is not correct. Option B, install an RDP client on your desktop, set a Windows username and password in the GCP console, use the credentials to log in to the instance. In this option, it just suggests to install RDP client and set the username and password. So setting the username and password will allow access, but we also need to set up a firewall rule for port 3389 for RDP. So in this option, since we are not setting the firewall, this is not the correct one. Option C, set a Windows password in the GCP console. Verify that a firewall rule for port 22 exists. Click the RDP button in the GCP console and supply the credentials to login. So here they are suggesting us to use the port 22, but this port 22 is used for SSH and not for RDP, so this option is not correct. Option D, set a Windows username and password in the GCP console. Verify that a firewall rule for port 3389 exists. Click the RDP button in the GCP console and supply the credentials to login. So here we are setting the username and password. So this provides access to login, and we are also setting the firewall rule on port 3389. So these are all the essential things which we need to set up to RDP to the Windows server. So once we perform steps 1 and 2, we can just click the RDP button in the GCP console and supply this credentials, username and password to log into the Windows server. So this is the correct option. So option D is the correct one for this question. So here Windows VM uses RDP port 3389 protocol to allow users to connect to it, and on Linux server we will be using SSH port 22. Now let's move ahead with the next question. You have taken the responsibility of deploying every new iteration of your app to development and test environments in GCP. Both environments are located in separate GCP projects in different regions and zones. How can you deploy a compute engine instance to both environments through the command line interface? So these are the options available. Option A, create two configurations in gcloud, one for development and other for test environment. Run gcloud config configurations activate to switch between configurations and use gcloud commands to deploy compute engine instance. Using gcloud config configurations activate, we can switch between two gcloud configurations. And through command line interface, we can deploy the compute engine instance to both of these environments. So this option is correct. Option B, create two configurations in gcloud, one for development, another for test environment. Start the compute engine instance by running gcloud configuration list. gcloud configuration list will list only the configuration details, but it will not allow to switch between the configurations. So this option is not correct. Option C, activate two configuration at the same time using gcloud configurations activate. Start the compute engine instance by running gcloud config lists. This option is not correct because we will not be able to activate the two configurations at the same time. So this is not possible. So this option is not correct. Option D, activate two configuration at the same time using gcloud configuration activate. So here also it is suggesting to activate the two configurations, whereas it is not possible to activate both the configurations at the same time. So this option is not correct. So for this question, option A is the correct solution. Let's proceed with the next question. Your team is working on revamping a legacy application on GCP. You are tasked with updating the infrastructure, which is managed through complex deployment manager templates. You found that you need to significantly change one of the deployment manager templates to accommodate the change and want to confirm that the dependencies of all defined resources are properly met before committing it to the project. You need rapid feedback so that you can deploy quickly. What should you do? These are the options available. Now let's take a look at each of these options. Option A, write the deployment manager template using Python and use granular logging statements. This option is not correct because the logging statements will not provide any insight into dependencies in the current infrastructure. Option B, run deployment manager and monitor activity on the stack driver logging page of the GCP console. First, we need to apply a deployment before we can monitor its activity. And in the question, we have to preview the changes before applying. So this option is not correct. Option C, run the deployment manager template against a separate project with the same configuration and monitor for failures. Here also they are suggesting to run the deployment manager template. If we execute this template in project, it will cost money and the project will need to have all the existing infrastructure in place before we apply the new configuration. So this option is not correct. Option D, run the deployment manager template using the -preview option in the same project and observe the state of interdependent resources. Since the ask here is to preview the changes, this option is correct. The deployment manager provides a preview functionality. So we can make use of this preview functionality to review the changes in the infrastructure before applying any updates. So this option is the correct one. Now let's proceed with next question. Your company is an AC manufacturer. You are head of a research and development project and looking to build a mobile app to remotely access the AC. For this, it is essential to build a pipeline to process time series data. Given that services in boxes 2 and 3 are used for storage and analytics purpose respectively, which Google Cloud Platform services should you put in boxes 1, 2 and 3? Let's take a look at each of these options. Option A, Cloud Data Flow, Cloud Data Store, BigQuery. Option A is not correct because here data store is not the right database for time series data analysis. Option B, Firebase Messages, Cloud Spanner, BigQuery. Option B is incorrect because sending data from Firebase messaging to PubSub does not make any sense. Option C, Cloud Storage, BigQuery, Cloud Bigtable. Data from cloud storage cannot be directly sent to Bigtable and data store without a proper data processing pipeline, which is data flow. So this option is not correct. Option D, Cloud Data Flow, Cloud Bigtable, BigQuery. BigQuery and Bigtable are the right choices for time series data, and data flow can send data to both of them using the PubSub messages. So this option is correct. So option D is the correct solution for this question. You are a lead cloud engineer in a tech startup. Your team is building an app on App Engine. You have created a GCP project and deployed the app on App Engine standard environment, and your team is using it as the development environment. The required testing has succeeded, and now it is time to release the app to production. The production environment needs to be in a new GCP project. What approach should you take? These are the options available. Option A, create a new project using G-Cloud and deploy the app in it. This option is correct because we can use G-Cloud to create a new project for the production environment, and then we can deploy the code to the new project. Option B, use the same GCP project to create a new app engine service. This option is not correct because we cannot use G-Cloud to copy a deployment to another project. Option C, use the same GCP project to create a new app engine version. Here it suggests to create a same GCP project, but we still don't have a GCP project as we have not yet created. So this option is not correct. Option D, use gcloud to deploy the project. Specify the project parameter with a new project name to create the new project. Here the project parameter will not create a new project, so this option is not correct. So option A is the correct one for this question. Let's proceed with next question. Your app deals with the financial data of your customers and it needs to be audited by external auditors. You need to configure IAM Access Audit logging in BigQuery to facilitate the audit. How can you do it following Google recommended practices? These are the options available. Let's take a look at each of these options. Option A, add the auditors group to the logging viewer and BigQuery data viewer predefined IAM roles. So for logging and BigQuery access, the logging viewer and BigQuery data viewer role needs to be assigned. So it's always a best practice to create a group and assign permissions accordingly instead of providing access to individual users. So this option is correct. Option B, add the auditors group as a project editor. This suggests to create a custom role, which is not required in this case. Option C, add the auditor user accounts to the logging viewer and BigQuery data viewer predefined IAM roles. This option is not correct. It's always a best practice to group people who require similar permissions to a group and assign roles to the group instead of individual users. So here it suggests to add the user accounts to logging viewer and BigQuery data set predefined IAM roles, which is not correct. Option D, add the auditor user accounts as project editor. Again, here it suggests to create a custom role which is not required in this case. So, option A is correct for this question. Next question, your app is deployed on Compute Engine and it uses application default credentials to communicate with Google APIs. The app needs permission to write data into a particular cloud storage bucket. You want to follow Google recommended practices. What should you do? These are the options available. Option A, create a service account with an access scope and use this URL as the access scope. Option A is incorrect because such a scope does not exist. So this Google APIs dev storage write only. So this scope does not exist. So this option is not correct. Option B, create a service account with an access scope and use this URL as the access scope. Again, this option is not correct because granting a scope does not provide access to the resources. Option C, create service account and add it to the IAM role storage object creator for that bucket. This option is correct because here storage object creator role is the minimum required role to write data in a cloud storage bucket. So creating a service account and adding it to the IAM role for that bucket is the best solution for this question. Option D, create a service account and add it to the IAM role storage object admin for that bucket. This option does not follow the principle of least privilege. Since the question, the app needs permission to write only data to the bucket, providing storage object creator role is sufficient for this. Since we have to follow the Google recommended practice, we give preference to principle of least privilege. So option C is the correct solution for this question. Next question. Some of your highly sensitive banking management application data is stored on cloud storage. As per the recommendation from your security team, you enabled data access logging on the buckets. As a security drill, you want to verify activities for a particular user for these buckets. Using the fewest possible steps, you are interested in activities that involve the addition of metadata labels, and files that have been viewed from those buckets. How will you achieve this? These are the options available. Option A, view the information in the audit log in the GCP console. This option is correct because audit logs are more suitable for verifying the addition of metadata labels. So, option A is correct. And using this, you can verify all the activities for a particular user and also verify addition of any metadata labels. Option B, go to Stackdriver logging and filter the logs. This option is not correct because data access logs can be viewed from the activity logs and not from the Stackdriver logs. Option C, go to the storage section in the GCP console and look at bucket metadata. Storage section does not show any data access log, so this option is not correct. Option D, create a trace in Stackdriver to view the information. Here, Stackdriver trace does not show any access logs, so this option is not correct. So, option A is the correct solution for this question. Let's proceed with the next question. You have newly joined the operations and access governance team at a large organization. One of the teams has requested access to manage buckets and files in cloud storage in one of the GCP projects that you manage. Which IAM roles should you grant your colleagues? Option A, project editor. By granting project editor role, it does not follow the principle of least privilege. Since here we have to follow the Google's best practice, this is not the correct option. Option B, storage admin. Here, storage admin role provides the minimum permission which is required to create and manage the cloud storage bucket. Since here the team member needs access to manage buckets and files in cloud storage, so granting storage admin permission to the team member will be sufficient. Option C, storage object admin. Here, the storage object admin rule does not provide permission to create any cloud storage bucket. Here, the need is to access bucket and files in the cloud storage. So, this storage object admin is not correct. Option D, storage object creator. This option is not correct because the storage object creator can only create objects but not manage them. Let's proceed with next question. You work at a large product-based tech company. One of your joint business partners from the external company has requested access to a sensitive file on your cloud storage. Your partner does not use Google accounts. Given the sensitivity of the data, access to the content needs to be removed after 5 hours. You want to follow Google recommended practices. What should you do? Option A, create a signed URL with a 5-hour expiration and share the URL with the company. Signed URL is a URL which provides limited permission and time to make any request. So, signed URLs contain authentication information in their query string, allowing users without credentials to perform specific actions on a resource. So, when you generate a signed URL, you specify a user or the service account which must have sufficient permission to make the request that the signed URL will make. So once you generate a signed URL, anyone who possesses it can use the signed URL to perform specified action such as reading an object within a specified period of time. So for this scenario, option A is the correct solution. Option B, set object access to public and share the URL with a partner. Manually make the object private after 5 hours. This option is not correct because creating public objects for sensitive data is not secure. Option C, configure the storage bucket as a static website and furnish the object's URL to the company. Delete the object from the storage bucket after 5 hours. This option is not correct because making a storage bucket as a static website is not secure as the data is sensitive. Option D, create a new cloud storage bucket for the partner and copy the object to that bucket. Delete the bucket after 5 hours have passed. So this option requires lot of steps to be performed. Here we have to create a new storage bucket, then copy the object to that bucket, then delete the bucket. So this requires lot of efforts and it's a time consuming task. So for this question, option A is the correct solution. Next question, multiple teams in your company deploy their apps on a single JKE auto scaling cluster. You want to centralize monitoring by running a monitoring pod. that sends container metrics to a third party monitoring solution, which is the simplest way to do it. Option A, create a stateful set object and deploy the monitoring pod in it. Here, stateful set does get deployed to every node. So this option is not correct. Option B, deploy the monitoring pod in a daemon set object. Option B is correct because a daemon set gets deployed to every node in the cluster. Option C, ask developers to reference the monitoring pod in their deployments. This option is not correct because deployment does not get deployed to every node. Option D, reference the monitoring pod in a cluster initializer at the JKE cluster creation time. This option is not correct because the cluster is an auto-scaling cluster and new nodes will not have the monitoring pod deployed by default. Next question, your team is working on a messaging app. As part of application modernization to microservices, you will use PubSub from your App Engine app. The Cloud Pub or Sub API is currently disabled. You are given a service account JSON key to authenticate your application to the API, but you found that API calls to pub or sub are failing. What do you need to do? These are the options available. Option A, on the GCP console, activate the cloud pub or sub API in the API library. This option is correct because this here pub sub API needs to be enabled before the app engine can use it. Option B, Cloud PubSub API should be automatically enabled when the service account accesses it. This option is not correct because here the PubSub API will not get automatically enabled. Option C, deploy your application using the deployment manager. Rely on the automatic enablement of APIs used by the application being deployed. Again, here PubSub API will not automatically enabled. So we have to manually enable this API. So option C is not correct. Option D, use the App Engine default service account instead of a custom service account and grant it the role of Cloud PubSub admin. Have your application enable the API on the first connection to Cloud PubSub. Again, this option is not correct. As a first step, we have to enable the PubSub API before App Engine can use it. So for this question, option A is the correct one. This is the end of this video. I'll be posting another set of questions. So please stay tuned to the channel. And if you are new to my channel, please like and subscribe to my channel and stay up to date with the latest content on this channel. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you in the next video.